What's up, guys? So today we're gonna do a first impressions video on this guy. We're gonna do an unboxing and an installation in this brand new Sport SEMA M4 platform. And the reason why I'm choosing this as the platform to work off of is because it's one of those cheap airsoft guns that you can get from SEMA, and I felt like that this would be a good airsoft gun to do the upgrade on, since most people that would get an electronic trigger unit have more of a budget-friendly airsoft gun such as this. So we'll throw that ETU in this thing and see how it performs after we do an unboxing. Let's get to it.
Alrighty then.
Okay, so let's get this guy ripped open. Let's see if I can do this one-handed.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Nope. Can't do it one-handed, so I said screw it. Got everything all out and laid out for you guys. So the top portion just slides out like this after you get that wrapping off. Comes with a warning label. Please read your warnings before installing. Very important. You get a patch and a little bag with these little guys in it. Spring connectors for if you got a gel blaster. Shrink wrap for the terminals for your motor. Stickers. Plastic washer. And then Tamiya connectors if you for some reason want to go with Tamiya, which I highly discourage not doing because they're terrible connectors. And then as far as the electronic trigger unit goes, it does already have the terminals already connected in, so that's good that they gave you extra ones just in case. These two extra wires right here are for gel blasters, so you can just snip these two guys off if you're putting this in the airsoft gun, and in this case we are. I'm just gonna actually desolder the wire there and just take it off. And it's already pre-wired to Dean's, so good in my book. And since this is a micro switch MOSFET, the trigger, the sector gear, and the selector switch is on the micro switch. However, there is one massive downside that I ran into when I was inspecting this prior to making this video. The first one I opened up, the micro switch on this board is broken. So luckily, I have a second one that is not broken, and that's what it should look like. So yay, hooray for that. So that's a big thumbs down for me. I'm going to check for fitment. I'm going to get that SEMA over there apart and see how well this fits, if we have to make any modifications or whatever. Alright, got the gearbox out and take it apart. And I pull everything out. And you're not going to use this guy or this cutoff lever or the spring, so that will come out, and the only thing that will stay is the trigger. And before we install it, I'm going to snip off these two little wires here for gel blasters, these two guys right here, because we don't need them, and they'll just be in the way. So I'm gonna get those clipped off and do a quick fitment test to see if we need to make any modifications to the gearbox. So I got the old trigger setup out. When I went to go do my fitment test with this guy, I noticed right off the bat that this needs to be grinded down all the way flat. So I'm going to grab my Dremel, trim that all the way down, and get that knocked out real quick and see how it fits then. Got that little pillar thing grinded down with my Dremel, and I did my fitment test on this guy, and I found that this was a little bit too tall. This needs to be sitting down lower than the board itself by putting that hole right there in front of my finger over the top of that. This cannot stick out past the board. Additionally, found that this micro switch right here, when you go to put this board down, you got to be really careful because the facing of this micro switch right here sits right up against the edge of the gearbox right here. When you go to put this board in, watch out for that. You'll break off that micro switch if you don't pay attention. If it does not look like it's gonna fit, all you gotta do is grind some material off right here so it will drop down. And since we grinded material off of that guy right there and it sits lower, that means you're gonna have to grind some material off this screw. Right at the tip, not very much, probably like 1 or 2 millimeters. And the reason being is because this screw that came off of here that was holding your cutoff lever will stick out the other side and rub against your selector plate and cause issues. Make sure to grind the end of your screw off before you secure the board down to your gearbox. Alright, got it secured down. Now, one thing I wanted to show you guys that I just tried out myself. There's your micro switch for your trigger. And then if you notice this piece right here that's in front of my fingernail, that's reinforcement to stop your trigger from moving forward and land right on top of that trigger unit. To demonstrate this, I'm going to show you what it looks like. Put this trigger in. So you pull the trigger and it gets stopped just like that right there. They put a lot of solder there to give it plenty of durability to stop your trigger. So that's pretty cool. Never seen that before. So I mean, looking forward to see how well that works once everything's all back together, of course. Okay, so we know that this ETU will fit pretty good in this gearbox. The next thing that you want to pay attention to is, if you notice, suddenly the solid bushing is different. Well, that's because the factory bushing was sticking up so high that it was pushing into the board. So I use an 8mm FLT low profile bushing, and it sits lower so it doesn't make contact with the board. You don't want this board being lifted up by the bushing, so make sure to check that in your fitment test. The next thing that you want to pay attention to is how your cam interacts with that and how you put the sector gear on. Don't just take your sector gear and drop it straight down, because if this cam is pointing towards the switch, you'll press down on that switch and possibly snap it and break it. My suggestion is, when you go to test it and install it, just point the cam at a 12 o'clock position. Then you'll have no problem. Additionally, you'll want to shim your sector gear first before installing your board. The reason being is so that you know for a fact that this gear is shimmed up high enough that it's not going to rub on this guy. So I'm only showing you this way for demonstration purposes. So when I go put this thing together for realsies, this will be shimmed. One other thing to not do is, once this gear is in, do not, for the love of God, rotate it backwards, because it'll come back and snap that sucker off, because this switch is only designed to be pressed down in one direction. If you go this way, that cam's going to break that thing off. So bear that in mind when you're installing this. So when it comes to putting your selector plate back on, don't set it down and go this way. Again, you'll snap that selector switch. Instead, put it down and push it this way, because that's the way it's designed. Is it's only supposed to go this far and back forward again. This far and back forward again. Do not have it go this way in front of the switch like this and go that way, because you'll break that thing off. And one more thing about the selector plate. Remove this guy, because if you leave it on, it's going to hang up on this side of the micro switch. Once you take it off, then it should slide over just fine, just like that, without it hanging up. With all that stuff out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and get this all put together and do some tests. Comment below or join our Discord server, Wyshtech Airsoft. I'll leave links in the description below. Ask any questions. Here's another step in modding the gearbox for this electronic trigger unit. The pegs that are on this side of the shell need to be grinded down flat right here. I did trim these two a little bit. I didn't want to do it all the way because these are used to align the gearbox. And then I grinded that one down all the way and that one down all the way. And this is because the wires are just too thick and it won't let the gearbox close. So you risk damaging the wires if you don't do this. So changing plans on the wiring setup, how I wired it. Do it like this. The reason being is because if you do it this way, your sector gear rubs on the wire, so that's no good. Doing it this way, how I routed it, your trigger misses it because of that gap on the right side of the trigger, so it can still move freely without touching this wire. That way you don't rub the insulation off and therefore ruin it. Alright, got it together. Up to this point, just to test to make sure we got the electronic trigger unit set right, to make sure this works, the selector switch and the trigger obviously, and make sure it cycles. Off camera, I went ahead and tested it and I found out a problem, and I'm gonna have to pull the gearbox right back out. And I'll show you what that is. What happens is when I put it on semi, it shoots full auto. And if you listen carefully, hear that beep? That beep is an indication that it's switching to a different fire mode. That's semi, that's full auto. Semi, full auto. So to show you what happens when I try to shoot it, obviously semi, full auto. And then if I move the selector switch just between safe and semi, when it makes that another beep. So what that tells me is that I need to take this out and trim the tappet plate a little bit in such a way that it doesn't hit that micro switch for full auto. That micro switch on the electronic trigger unit is for full auto. So when that is pressed, it goes in full auto. So it's a simple fix. All I have to do is trim that selector plate, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so to show you guys what I'm talking about, this switch right here is for your full auto. As soon as it's pressed, the ETU goes in full auto. So in order to fix the issue that we're having, we have to trim some plastic right here, just a little bit. I'm probably gonna just do 1 millimeter and see what happens, and then go from there. It's gonna be some trial and error. A quick, neat trick to get this selector plate out without damaging this switch right here. Push it all the way back, and you can see right there, there's a low relief at the bottom of the selector plate right here for you to pry on and to pop it out. Okay, got the battery plugged in, motor plugged in, and I only put the center body pin and the back body pin in there to simulate that this is together. The reason why I got the motor plugged in is so I can hear when that switch is activated for full auto. So here we go. It's too close to semi if you ask me. I did trim that part of the plastic on the selector switch, but if you look, you can hear that. It's a little too close to semi, and ideally I want that beep to happen between semi and full auto. I'm going to take this gearbox back out and trim the selector plate one more time and see where it lands us. But we're getting there.
5 minutes later.
Alright, I just trimmed the selector plate. You can kind of see how much I've trimmed off versus this side, because usually this thickness right here is the same as this thickness, and so if you compare and look closely, you can see how much I trimmed off. I'm just doing trial and error, man. So when you go to put this selector plate back in, after you trimmed it, pick up the end right here, push down with your finger, and then slide the back end first, like this, all the way in. And then you'll hook this at the top here, and simply push down, and then slide it forward. There you go. That'll prevent you from breaking that switch there. Alright, I'm going to throw this back in the receiver and test it again. Got the gearbox back in. So now let's test it again and see what happens. So when I flip this to semi, we should not hear a beep at all. Okay, now let's see when that beep happens when I go to full auto. Still a little too close to semi if you ask me. So it just beeped at that point. I'll go back to semi and see if it beeps again. Beeping right at semi. I would like to have it beep again before it goes back to semi, just in case that selector plate rattles around during while it's shooting in semi, so it doesn't accidentally put it back on full auto. So I'm going to trim it again. I'm going to do that off camera, and then we'll see how this thing runs, and then I'm going to cover some tips and tricks to keep in mind when you're installing this electronic triggering along with what we already discussed.
2 hours later.
Okay, I finally got it after that third trim. I got it to change from semi to full auto right about in the center with the selector switch right about there. And now I'm going to cover on programming this thing. It's pretty simple to get started. First plug in your battery, and then you'll pull and hold the trigger until it makes 2 long beeps, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, pull and hold the trigger in full auto. Now it's in programming on. 1 beep. Now it's on semi-auto. 3 beeps there. So on and so forth. Now it's on rate of fire, trigger mode, selector type, auto loading, that's for gel blasters. Now it's back to low battery warning. Now you pull and hold and you'll get a long beep. Now you're under this category. You just did 3 beeps, that's for that. 4 beeps for that. 5 beeps for that. 6 beeps for that. Semi. Okay, if I want binary, pull and hold the trigger. And I had to wait until it did 2 beeps when I was under this category. I hope that makes sense, but to show you, now it's on binary. So that's how you program this thing. It's pretty simple. The manual does come with this chart on here. It's a pretty long manual too. You just gotta look around and you'll find it. And if you forget how to program it, the English is kind of broken on this. It took me a minute to figure it out, but basically that's all you gotta do to program whatever setting you want on this thing. And those settings are low battery warning. If you're gonna run 11.1s, do set on 11.1s. You can set it to a maximum of 14.8. You can even use 9.6 or just shut it off. You got semi-auto mode, so you can set all these parameters. Full auto, you can set pre-cocking, fire interval. That's basically for your DMR mode. You can change your rate of fire. I don't recommend messing with this if you're running a brushless motor. Trigger mode, normal, sensitive, AUG mode. AUG mode, if you're unfamiliar with that, that just means that it'll shoot semi, half-light pull, and then light press, semi-auto, and heavy press for full auto. Selector type, so this unit won't fit in the G36 or AK-47, so I won't even worry about that. And auto loading, that's just for gel blasters, so you don't need to worry about that. That's how you program it.
Alrighty then.
So to give you guys my overall thoughts, the installation on this thing is not bad at all. It's pretty simple. It's like installing a Payrun version 2, but I think it's a little bit easier when it comes to calibrating your selector plate with the electronic trigger unit. It does off low battery warning by beeping 4 times when the battery's running low, but when it comes to that, make sure you set the electronic trigger unit for the battery you intend to use, otherwise it won't work right. You can program semi and full auto to basically almost any setting you want. It does have the capability of pre-cocking if you so choose to do that. The only downside to this setup, since it uses micro switches, you can't adjust trigger sensitivity on this thing unless you get a tunable trigger that has set screws, so you can set it so right where it's about to shoot. It's the only way you're going to do it is through mechanical means, unlike the electronic trigger units that have optical sensors. But if you ask me, as long as you take all the precautions mentioned earlier in this video, the installation on this electronic trigger unit is pretty damn simple. It's by far one of the most easiest ones to install. Depending on the brand that you put it in, you may or may not need to do some slight modifications. Any version 2 TM spec gearbox, this electronic trigger unit should work just fine. And if you ask me, my opinion about this thing, I think it's a great budget-friendly option to go with if you're trying to keep your costs on upgrading your airsoft gun on the low. So that being all said, if you got a Sportline AR or MP5, that one of those cheapos for like under 200 bucks, this is a damn good idea to go with, especially if you want to run 11.1 LiPo. For less than 40 bucks, you can't beat that. It's got some good quality of life features that a lot of other brands of airsoft guns that have electronic units don't offer, like the SEMA Platinum series, for example. I would put this unit in there because T238 did say that this guy can handle 14.8 volts and enough amperage to handle a DSG build. I plan on doing another video of doing a DSG with this MOSFET to see how much it can handle and see how well it functions. So that being said, guys, let me know what you guys think, what your opinions are on this electronic trigger unit down in the comments below. And other than that, hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see the video of me running a DSG build based off of this electronic trigger unit and really put it to the test. Other than that, that's all I got for you guys. Stay safe and remember to call your hits. I'll see you on the next one. See you guys.